A boy's best friend is his mother. Why, she wouldn't even hurt a fly. I'm John Renton with By the Numbers, Episode 6 on the Psycho movies. Not Rear Window, not that. You know, the one where James Stewart was all depressed with a broken leg, even though Grace fucking Kelly was willing to do anything for him. Why would you be depressed if you had Grace Kelly, the beautiful goddess that she was, wanting to do anything for you? Anyway, we're here to talk about Psycho. There were 5 movies in the Psycho franchise. Psycho Killer, Psychotronic, Psycho Stabbings all around the Bates Motel, and then they made 4 more of these, including a remake to Psycho. They made a remake to the Alfred Hitchcock classic. More on that in a bit, but let me know your thoughts on the Psycho movies in the comments. I retro-reviewed the first Psycho a couple years ago, I think, for his 60th anniversary. I'm not exactly sure. I've done a whole bunch of content, about 4,000 videos since 2019. Nevertheless, let's talk about Psycho. And honestly, the first Psycho really did receive some mixed reviews initially. People were shocked by it. It has since become pretty much Alfred Hitchcock's most beloved movie, to be quite honest. People have asked, people ask numerous people, including myself, what's your favorite movie of all time? And while that's subject to debate because there's so many great goddamn movies from current times, old times, silent movies, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all that and everything throughout the decades. Films so well known, films that aren't that well known, some films that only I seem to really know about, other films that everybody loves and I don't really care for. The whole point is Psycho would be on my Mount Rushmore of favorite movies of all time. I can rewatch Psycho once a month and not get bored with it. Even though I know the shit that's coming, I've watched it at least 10 times, I can still be shocked and find new little things in there that really, really surprise me. Oh my god, I can't believe this was so goddamn great, and how Alfred Hitchcock was able to make this movie so iconic, so well known. I mean, my fucking goodness, if you take a look at, just the cast of Psycho, I mean, you just take a look. Anthony Perkins, it fucking launched his goddamn career. Anthony Perkins is fucking tremendous. I mean, Anthony Perkins, he died at the age of 60. Due to certain circumstances, it's pretty, you can read up on. I'm not going to go into them here. But Anthony Perkins never really fully reached the zenith that he hit with Psycho. But he still has this to, hang his hat on, or at least his family does. I mean, his legacy was defined by Psycho, and then he did films off and on for another 30 or so years. So, as far as numbers for the Psycho movie, the budget was around $807K. That's quite a bit for back in 1960, quite a bit. But Alfred Hitchcock had a, amazing amount of films that he had done by that point. I mean, here's a few of my favorites. I own a lot of Alfred Hitchcock stuff. Strangers on a Train, that I will retro-review at some point because it was tremendous. You have Rebecca. Oh, wait, that's Jessica. I'm sorry. Joan Fontaine and Laurence Olivier. Joan Fontaine, yeah, I would have. And also, Ingrid Bergman and Gregory Peck in Spellbound. I mean, yeah, who wouldn't want to have been with fucking Ingrid Bergman? Or Gregory Peck, for that matter, to be perfectly honest. So, nevertheless, we are here to talk about the various other Psycho movies. But before that, hey, let's talk about this collection. Get this collection, even though I'm sure there are other collections out. Rear Window, Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho, and The Birds. When The Birds is the least of the movies in your collection and still really goddamn good, there you go. So, yeah, $807,000 budget. 8.3 million in today's money. Now, the opening weekend numbers aren't available. They aren't available at all. Couldn't find them anywhere when I looked online. I would imagine that the movie probably had a sizable opening with the marketing campaign. The fact is Alfred fucking Hitchcock, who's one of the greatest directors of all time. Just ignore how he treated his female co-stars. Ignore all that, or at least push that to the side to enjoy his films, even though it's really hard to, because he really didn't treat all that many of them that great. Tippi Hedren. Read up how he treated Tippi Hedren. You might, feel something cold and steel because you'll be holding something to your head to forget that happened. Domestic gross, $32 million. 32 million. And maybe there were some re-releases and stuff like that. It had a 1969 re-release, but let's just go with $1960. Since 1969, by that point, might have been a little adjusted. Nearly $330 million in today's money. And then it made another little bit overseas to add about another 600,000 in today's money onto its total. $328.7 million specifically in today's money for a movie that, yes, Alfred Hitchcock by this point was pretty much cemented as being one of the most iconic directors. And he would still make other movies after this. He would make The Birds, make other things. Made Marnie. Marnie wasn't all that well received from what I recall. He did Family Plot, I think, and Family Plot, I believe, was the last big one that he did. Alfred Hitchcock Presents is a pretty good series. But that being said, the original Psycho, 95% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Who was the other 5% that said it wasn't that good? I just want to talk. In all seriousness, people can feel however they want. 8.5 on IMDb. And we get a 96% critical rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 97 on Metacritic. Who's the 4% that said that it wasn't all that good and it can't be certified 100% fresh? I just want to talk with my fist or my hand slapping you across. In all seriousness, Psycho is one of my favorite movies of all time. It would have to be on the Mount Rushmore. It would have to be. I don't know if it would be the top, but it would be on there. And then it lay dormant for a while because Hitchcock didn't want to make sequels, and also Alfred Hitchcock died in 79 or 80. I forget exactly what year. He was born 1899 or 1898, so he was already old as it was. But Psycho 2 came out in 1983. I don't know why. I don't know why they thought it was a good idea, because this never really should have gotten a sequel or a remake. More on that later. But Psycho 2, 1983. 22 or so years after Norman Bates was locked up, they said, oh, he's good enough, let's let him go out and then he can reopen the Bates Motel and everything and repeat the same stuff because he's cured. He didn't do that. It was a dissociative personality disorder. Easy for me to say. But a $5 million budget, and that's $15.2 million in today's money, so we're going about 3 times here by 1983. $8.3 million opening weekend. Pretty good, because the buzz was there to see if they could capture the magic. They didn't. They didn't. $25.3 million in today's money. And then a $34.7 million gross, which would be like $106 million thereabout in today's money. And same domestic. It didn't really get a wide release worldwide. Those figures weren't available, even if it did. I gotta be honest, Psycho 2, I watched the RiffTrax version. I've seen it before on RiffTrax, and it's not bad. It does have a lot of unintentionally comedic moments. It's fine for what it is, but it had to follow the first Psycho, so it wasn't going to do all that great. 60% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes, 6.6 on IMDb. Not all that bad, 61% critical rating and on Rotten Tomatoes, and 5.4 on, or 54 rather, on Metacritic. So, okay, it's above average. That's not all that bad, I guess. And then, despite the fact, actually, I don't even think Norman had opened up the Bates Motel. I think he reopened it in Psycho 3. I haven't watched them in years. I might rewatch them and make fun of them. I don't know. Psycho 3 came out 3 years later, 1986, for those that aren't mathematicians. $8.4 million budget, and that's 23.3 in today's money. So again, basically about 3 times. $3.2 million opening, so not nearly what Psycho 2 did. $8.8 million in today's money, and the gross was $14.4 million, or $40 million in today's money. And yeah, Psycho 3 wasn't great. I recall it not being all that great. Anthony Perkins, unfortunately, by this point, his health was deteriorating because of circumstances. Read up on it, kids. And this was, it was clear that this was not going to be that well received, or it's probably not going to get a sequel, and if it did, the budget was probably going to be cut significantly, because the audience reception stands at 34% on Rotten Tomatoes, 5.4 on IMDb, 59% critical rating, a lot higher than I expected, to be perfectly honest, 58 on Metacritic, so a few points higher than Psycho 2. And then we get to Psycho 4, The Beginning. It was a TV movie that came out in 1990. See, this is what I meant by the fact that if they made another one, it probably wasn't going to get that much of a wide release or was just going to get shoved on TV. And this is more Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins, a.k.a. a couple of years before his passing, talked to a radio host, CCH Pounder, which I promise you all, I react to that last name with the good taste and maturity that everybody has come to expect from me. And let's be honest, if you expect that, you really have not paid much attention at all. Pounder, I barely know her. And there's no budgetary, info. I would imagine 3 million, 2 to 3 million, which would be about 7 million today. I mean, and I'm just guessing here. 33% audience reception on Rotten Tomatoes, 5.4 on IMDb. Critical reception on Rotten Tomatoes, there's 3 reviews that are posted, and they're all negative. I mean, they're maybe at best average, so I would imagine a 40 to 50% rating, and nothing on Metacritic. Nobody really hated this. Everybody just said it was kind of unnecessary. Though one notable thing was the fact that this is about the beginning, so it was about, Norman, I told you to stop bothering the guest. Mother, younger, and being very incestuous with her son, the younger Norman, obviously. And the young Mrs. Bates was played by Olivia Hussey. You hussy? Let's be perfectly honest, Olivia Hussey was very desirable in 1990. And probably still is now. I mean, I haven't seen her much of anything lately, but Olivia Hussey looked great in Black Christmas. That was 74. A little bit uncomfortable, the fact that people found her desirable in the Romeo and Juliet movie, where she was a teenager. That probably wasn't the best thing. At least she was in her early to mid-20s by the time Black Christmas came out, or at least early 20s, so okay, cool. People fawning over her then weren't necessarily creepy. Read up on that Romeo and Juliet movie that she was in. You may want to dunk yourself in a river and not get back up, given the shit that happened on that set. But Olivia Hussey, yes, in 1990, I would have and you would have too. Now, movie wasn't all that great. It was really just a lot of talking, a lot of reenactments, and not all that great. And it was the worst entry in the franchise until 1998, when Gus Van Sant made Psycho, aka the remake no one asked for. Gus Van Sant deserves to be, run out of town on a rail. When he dies, his body should be dug up and beaten about because he made this. If he's cremated, we should be allowed to piss on his ashes, at least every Psycho fan. How dare you, Gus Van Sant? How dare you do this? $60 million is what he got for this. This is Uwe Boll levels of getting financing for something that nobody fucking wanted. It was basically about... It's about 2 times now by this point, or just under. It's about $112 million in today's money for a movie with Anne Heche. And I know that Anne Heche had her personal demons, and I don't wish ill upon her, but you put Anne Heche in the starring role and you expect it to do well even in 1998. Volcano wasn't the worst, flop, but it was also the worst goddamn volcano movie that came out in 97. There were 2. Dante's Peak was better. When Dante's Peak, that had a lady jump in an acidic river and somehow survive, and not long enough to pull the boat to the shore, and that's the better of the 2, because you have a guy in a subway that would have melted and died from the fumes, somehow throw a body. Yeah, Anne Heche wasn't the worst problem, but that movie didn't do well. 6 Days, 7 Nights didn't do all that well. Anne Heche was not necessarily a bankable star. She was great acting like in Down on Your Luck, Out of Touch, Southern, I guess, inbred individual, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. No, really, she was in that. Enough dumping on Anne Heche. Let's dump on the rest of the goddamn movie. They had Vince Vaughn in the Anthony Perkins role. They could have dug up Anthony Perkins at this point, who had been dead for about going on 6 years, and had him do a better job than Vince fucking Vaughn. who really has some questionable views of his own and also isn't a very good actor. He's half as funny as he thinks he is. He's 5% as dramatic and as good at acting as he thinks he is, and Vince Vaughn has never really been that good. People say he was good in Freaky. Katherine Newton was the main reason that film was good, which pretty much applies to the Paranormal Activity movie. So yeah, $60 million budget, but don't worry, it's been nearly 40 fucking years. People will accept this. Gus Van Sant did Good Will Hunting. Goodwill Mike Hunting. Hunt. Can't help it. Don't worry, it made $10 million in its opening weekend. That's less than $60 million for those that can't do math. $18.6 million in today's money. It made it made just over $21 million in today's month, or in 1998, which would be $40 million in today's money. It made $37.1 million worldwide, so it really only made about another 16 roughly, and topped out at just over $69 million in today's money. So it didn't even make its budget back. And, with all the marketing and stuff like that, there's no way that if that thing broke even, it would have been amazing. Now, maybe the marketing cost was included in the $60 million. I don't know. But even if it was, if you're only making $9.2 million profit on a $60 million budget, you botched Julianne Moore being in a movie. She was born in 1960. You botched a 38-year-old Julianne Moore role. Julianne Moore in 1998, Julianne Moore now. I still would, and you would too. William H. Macy was in this. There were a lot of good people in this. Anne Heche and Vince Vaughn. That's unfair. Vince Vaughn was a terrible actor and still is. I wish I could say was, but unfortunately the motherfucker's still alive. I don't know why Vince Vaughn's getting dumped on. Let's get back to this. Yeah, the gross was not great. The audience reception was an abysmal 28%, and it was about 20% too high, in my opinion. 4.6 on IMDb, 40% critical rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and 47 on Metacritic. Yeah, way to take. Yeah, still terrifying after all these years, by the way. Also, Grace Kelly, come on, Grace Kelly. Why are you upset, James Stewart? Anyway, so yeah, still terrifying after all these years. The only thing terrifying about the 1998 version of Psycho is that it got made and Gus Van Sant somehow has escaped the clutches of death. So I'm done dumping on the 1998 Psycho movie. Do you want me to retro review that movie? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.